The Trump administration's tariffs were introduced with the intention of protecting American industries and bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. The idea was to make imported goods more expensive, encouraging companies and consumers to buy American-made products instead. On paper, this sounded like a win for domestic factories and workers, a bold move to strengthen the nation's economic independence. But for Walmart, the world's largest retailer and a company deeply woven into the fabric of American life, these tariffs quickly created a crisis. Walmart's business model is built on offering the lowest possible prices to millions of customers, many of whom rely on the store for everyday essentials. Suddenly, the company found itself caught in the crossfire of a global trade dispute. Tariffs are essentially taxes on imported goods, and for a retailer like Walmart, whose shelves are stocked with products sourced from all over the world, especially China, this meant that costs could rise dramatically, almost overnight. The company had to grapple with a new reality. The very foundation of its low-price promise was under threat. Walmart, sourcing a significant portion of its merchandise from China, faced a difficult decision. Should it absorb these new costs, which would eat into already thin profit margins, or should it pass the costs on to customers, risking its reputation as the go-to destination for affordable goods? Either choice carried serious consequences for the company's future and for the millions of families who depend on Walmart's low prices. The impact was immediate and deeply felt. Walmart's core customers, low and middle-income families who carefully budget every dollar, were suddenly faced with the prospect of paying more for groceries, clothing, school supplies, and other essentials. For many, even a small increase in prices could mean tough choices at the checkout counter or having to go without. While the administration claimed that foreign nations would bear the brunt of these tariffs, the reality was quite different. American importers like Walmart were the ones paying these taxes as soon as goods arrived at U.S. ports. These increased costs inevitably trickled down to shoppers, making everyday life more expensive for millions of Americans. What started as an abstract policy debate in Washington quickly became a tangible reality at the checkout line. Prices began to rise on a wide range of products, from groceries and clothing to electronics and home goods. For Walmart, the challenge was not just about numbers on a balance sheet, it was about maintaining trust with customers who counted on the store to help them stretch their paychecks further. In the end, Walmart's struggle became a powerful case study in how protectionist trade policies, no matter how well-intentioned, can sometimes backfire. Instead of helping American families and businesses, the tariffs ended up hurting both, highlighting the complex and often unintended consequences of global economic decisions. Walmart wasn't alone in sounding the alarm. Other major brands like Nike, Ford, and Target quickly followed suit, issuing public warnings that the newly imposed tariffs would leave them with little choice but to raise prices on a wide range of products. These announcements weren't just isolated statements. They represented a growing chorus of concern from some of the most influential names in American retail and manufacturing. The message was clear. The impact of these tariffs would ripple far beyond the boardroom, reaching directly into the wallets of everyday consumers. These companies, deeply dependent on complex global supply chains, suddenly faced millions of dollars in unexpected new costs. Everything from sneakers and athletic gear to automobiles and electronics was affected. The tariffs meant that raw materials and finished goods coming from overseas would now be significantly more expensive, squeezing profit margins and forcing tough decisions. For many, the only viable option was to pass these costs along to customers, raising prices on store shelves across the country. Retailers and manufacturers across nearly every sector echoed the same urgent message. The scale of these tariffs was simply too large to absorb internally. Executives spoke out at press conferences and in interviews, explaining that the increased costs would inevitably trickle down to consumers. Many companies began to prepare for a new reality, where price tags would have to be adjusted upward just to stay afloat. Even producers of everyday essentials like Procter & Gamble, which makes household staples found in nearly every American home, announced plans to implement price hikes. Food and household goods, items that families rely on daily, were no longer immune to the effects of the tariffs. The cost of living was poised to rise, not just for luxury items, but for basic necessities as well. The consensus among business leaders was unmistakable. American companies, not foreign governments, were bearing the brunt of these new costs. And as they struggled to maintain profitability, they had little choice but to pass those costs on to consumers. Shoppers began to notice their grocery bills creeping higher, and families started to feel the squeeze in their monthly budgets. Despite reassurances from some political leaders, the economic reality painted a different picture. Nearly every major company was bracing for a chain reaction of rising prices, and the data showed a clear upward trend. News outlets reported on the growing gap between political promises and the lived experiences of businesses and consumers alike. The stage was set for a nationwide shift in the cost of living, all triggered by a single policy decision. As families across America reviewed their receipts and watched their expenses climb, it became clear that the effects of these tariffs would be felt in every household, reshaping spending habits and financial priorities for months, if not years, to come. Walmart's warning was blunt. Tariffs on Chinese goods would mean higher prices for American families. Essentials like groceries, toys, and electronics, core to household budgets, were all affected. With thin profit margins, Walmart couldn't absorb the costs without raising prices. The company signaled that price hikes were imminent, making the trade war a personal issue for millions. The debate over tariffs was no longer abstract. It was about the real cost of a family's weekly shopping trip. Walmart's transparency underscored the profound impact these policies would have on everyday Americans. The Trump administration insisted Walmart should absorb the tariffs, not pass them to customers. Officials argued big companies could renegotiate with suppliers or accept lower profits. Business leaders pushed back, saying absorbing such costs was unsustainable, especially in low-margin retail. The public was caught between government assurances and warnings from their local stores. The debate exposed a gap between political rhetoric and economic reality. In practice, it was American companies paying tariffs at the border, not foreign governments. The clash forced a national conversation about who really pays for trade wars. Economists overwhelmingly agree. Tariffs function as a tax on consumers, not on foreign countries or overseas manufacturers. When governments impose tariffs, the intention is often to protect domestic industries or to penalize foreign competitors. However, the reality is that the burden of these tariffs is rarely shouldered by the exporting country. Instead, the costs are almost always passed down the supply chain until they reach the end consumer. When importers bring goods into the country, they are required to pay the tariff up front. This extra cost is then factored into the price of the product as it moves through wholesalers, distributors, and finally, to retailers. By the time the product reaches store shelves, the tariff has been fully absorbed into the final price tag, making everyday goods more expensive for everyone. For Walmart's customers, who are often low and middle-income families, even a small increase in the price of essentials like groceries, cleaning supplies, or clothing can have a significant impact. These families typically have tight budgets, so any rise in costs means they have to make tough choices about what to buy or what to cut back on. Unlike luxury items, which can be skipped or delayed, basic necessities like food, toiletries, and household goods are non-negotiable. Families can't simply stop buying these items, so they end up absorbing the full impact of higher prices caused by tariffs. Despite claims from some government officials that foreign countries like China are paying the tariffs, basic economic principles and real-world data show otherwise. The evidence is clear. It's American businesses and consumers who pay the price, not foreign exporters. U.S. companies pay the tariffs when goods arrive at the port, and to stay profitable, they have no choice but to pass those costs along. This means higher prices at the register for everyday shoppers, as retailers adjust price tags to reflect their increased expenses. When Walmart executives warned that tariffs would lead to higher prices, it wasn't a threat or a negotiating tactic, it was simply a predictable response to the new financial reality. Retailers operate on thin margins, so any increase in costs is quickly felt by consumers. The real-world result is clear. Trade policy decisions made in Washington have a direct and immediate effect on the wallets of American families. Tariffs may sound like a way to protect domestic jobs, but in practice, they act as a hidden tax, raising the cost of living for millions of people across the country. The tariffs forced Walmart into a delicate balancing act, protecting low prices while facing unpredictable costs. The company even withdrew its short-term profit outlook, citing trade uncertainty. About a third of Walmart's U.S. products are imported, many from tariff-affected countries. Walmart's strategy became day-to-day management of inventory and expenses to shield shoppers from price hikes. Despite the turmoil, leadership projected confidence and reaffirmed long-term growth goals. Rising insurance and other costs added to the challenge, making financial planning even harder. Walmart's approach: weather the storm, now hoping for more stable trade policies ahead. To fight rising costs, Walmart accelerated efforts to diversify its supply chain, seeking alternatives to China. Shifting suppliers is slow and expensive, but necessary to reduce tariff exposure. Walmart also pushed suppliers to share the burden, though many had little room to absorb extra costs. Internally, the company doubled down on efficiency, cutting waste, optimizing logistics, and managing inventory tightly. These moves freed up resources to keep prices stable for as long as possible. Leadership stressed agility, ready to adapt as trade policies shifted. Still, some price increases were unavoidable, and Walmart was upfront about the challenges. The impact of tariffs rippled far beyond Walmart, hitting airlines, manufacturers, and farmers alike. Uncertainty from the trade war made it hard for businesses of all sizes to plan or invest. Small and medium businesses, with fewer resources, struggled most. Some raised prices, others cut jobs. The tariffs disrupted supply chains and raised costs across nearly every industry. From Midwest farmers to California tech firms, economic anxiety spread. The broad reach of the tariffs showed how interconnected the U.S. economy is. Protectionist policies triggered a cascade of negative effects, harming the very economy they aimed to protect. As prices rose and uncertainty grew, consumer confidence fell, threatening the backbone of the U.S. economy. Walmart was caught between its low-price promise and the reality of rising costs. Executives worked to absorb costs, but their ability was limited. The future for both Walmart and its customers hinged on unpredictable trade policy decisions. If tariffs persisted, higher prices would hit those least able to afford them. The trade war turned global politics into a daily concern for American families. The question remains, what will be the long-term cost of these trade disputes for American households?